Good afternoon. My name is Phil Hewitt, Group Arts Editor for Sussex Newspapers, and it's lovely but also sobering to be speaking to Clare Apel, District and City Councillor in Chichester, who has just come back from a very emotional, hugely significant trip to Vienna to honour the remarkable man who saved both your parents' lives. Just set the context. How did this man, Thomas Kendrick, save both your parents' lives?
Thomas Kendrick was employed by the British government to run the whole spy network for the British government, centred in Vienna for the whole of Europe. But he was what everyone knew him as the passport officer. When the Germans invaded Austria on March the 12th, 1938, through his spying network, he knew what was going to happen, that the Jews would be rounded up and sent to their death camps. So he and his team in the British Embassy set up a whole system of producing false documents to give to as many Jews as possible. And between March the 12th and the beginning of August, over 10,000 Austrian Jews were saved, sent abroad, wherever, but were saved from the gas chambers. And the first two were my parents and my two brothers, aged 3 and 11 months. And we had the privilege to be invited to the British Embassy, who after all this time have at last acknowledged Thomas Kendrick and his team for the incredible bravery and tough work they did. Some of them got killed for doing it, to give life to these people. And it was a sobering thought to look round at my children and my brother's children and think, none of us would be here but for this man.
Mm. And you wouldn't have been born, would you?
I wouldn't have been born. It was, and the other thing we did was the Austrians put up a wall, which they opened in October 2021, with the names of more than 65,000 Jews on it. It's done in blocks of marble. And we went there to look, and it was very, very upsetting to see something like 30 of the Eisinger names, which was my name, and then about 25 of the Fleischmann names, which was my grandmother's name.
So Claire, to put this in context then, more than 50 names from your family on this memorial.
Yeah, yes.
And as you say, imagine that repeated across Europe. It's just so mind-bogglingly awful, isn't it?
The evil, the whole evil side of this is just brought it home. It really did, this visit. It was a very sobering one for me. People said, oh, have a lovely time in Vienna. I looked upon it as a pilgrimage to my family. And I'm so glad I've done it, but I wouldn't want to do it every day because it was incredibly upsetting.
Yeah. And it must be such a, I don't know if endorsement is the right word, but for so many years in Chichester, you have been so central to the Holocaust Memorial activities every January. And this must be absolutely underlining why you do what you do.
It's so important to commemorate not just my family, but all the families who've suffered this terrible loss. Because unfortunately, not all my family were on that on those blocks of marble, because a lot of my family was Czech, and a number of them are on a big memorial in Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia.
Goodness. And to see the plaque at the embassy, to see that wall, to see the names, do you just think fantastic that it's happened now, or do you think, yes, why on earth has this not happened years ago?
Yeah, the Austrians, I have to be honest, have taken a long time to acknowledge their part in the Holocaust. But Lord Pickle said something very interesting when he drew back the curtains on the plaque. He said, governments give us decrees and policies we've got to do. And if you've got any sense as a politician, you don't follow them. Thomas Kendrick and his team were told by the British government they mustn't be involved in the Jewish question and saving Jews. And they ignored that completely. And look at the work they did. It was amazing.
What a superb man. When he came back from Austria, having been arrested, captured, interrogated, but released, he continued fantastic work in the UK, didn't he?
Yeah, he continued running the whole spy network, interviewing all the German prisoners that were taken and finding out. And a man called he actually rescued Sigmund Freud, Weidenfeld, the publisher, amongst the thousands he rescued, and a man called Fritz Lustig, whose son is a big BBC journalist called Robin Lustig.
Yeah.
Robin Lustig, and he interviewed Helen Fry, who's brought out this book on Thomas Kendrick, and he said, would you think that but for Thomas we'd have lost the war? And Helen Fry, who wrote the book, said yes, because he found out all about the V2 bombs, the way he did his extraordinary sort of schmoozing of all these awful prisoners, got so much information, and he used the Jewish Austrian refugees as the listeners, listening in to the conversations that these prisoners had, because when they interviewed them, they give them a lovely gentle time, and they go back to their cells and say, what idiots the British are. They don't know how to interview. We didn't tell them about this, this, and this. And with all the listeners, because he bugged every wall, every ceiling, every plant, every tree, everywhere. I mean, he'd take them for tea at the Ritz. Moves them that way, and then all this information he got, and it was just extraordinary.
And this was all subsequent to his achievements in Austria. You must have come back emotionally exhausted from.
Yes, I did actually.
Visit.
It was. I found it amazing, but very tough.
Goodness. Well, thank you so much for talking to me now. Really lovely to speak to you, Claire.
We got there in the end.
Thank you.